So my grandfather always said that every true story has two parts. There's the true part, and there's the story part. And with those parameters in place, despite the name of the competition, I will endeavor to tell you a true story. So, I grew up as the kid with the smallest hands in a family of large animal veterinarians. I'll give you a second. There you go. When you have the smallest hands, you are given a specific set of duties. Responsibilities that I inherited from my father when I was 8 years old. From that time forward, I was the unwilling participant in the miracle of birth hundreds of times before anyone bothered to explain to me how it worked. When I finally got the whole birds and the bees, I wasn't shocked. It filled in some gaps. It did. Anyway, this is how it would work. At 2 o'clock in the morning, invariably 2 o'clock in the morning, my grandfather would come from his house across this little grassy patch that we called the Big Lawn, because we had no imagination when we named things. He would come across the big lawn and he would knock on my window. When I heard the knock, I would reach behind my head, I would grab my pillow, and I would throw it into the hallway so my mother would know not to make breakfast for me because I was going with my grandfather. I would get dressed, I would climb out the window, follow him to his truck, and off we would drive to Erda or Tooele, off into the night somewhere, where for the rest of the night, if I was lucky, I was indoors. But I was usually outside, on my stomach, with my arm outstretched, and my grandfather hovering over me saying really helpful things like, "If you pull your arm out, we're gonna be here all night. Do you want to start all over again? I don't want to be here all night." It really was quite a great way of growing up. Anyway. So one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, knock, knock, knock on the window. I open the window, I throw my pillow, and I open the window, I start climbing out, and my grandfather says, "Stop. Do you have a darker shirt than that?" Which was weird, because up until that point, there had never been a sheep or a pig that had complained about my fashion sense. And I said, "I have a black t-shirt." It was great. It had like a blue shark on it. It was the 80s. It was awesome. And I put it on, and he looked at me and he said, "Turn it inside out." Right? And he said, "Your Sunday school shoes are black, aren't they?" And there comes a point when you just stop asking. I said, "Yeah," and I put my Sunday school shoes on, and he said, "All right, come on." And I followed him off into the night, and we're walking towards his truck, and I noticed his truck is facing the wrong direction. Usually it's facing the street. It would drive off to some farm ranch somewhere. But it was facing towards his fields, the east field and the west field. We have no imagination when it comes to naming things. You name things for what they do or where they are. At that time in the east field, we had 3 cows, one named Black Cow, a red one named Rosie, and another one named 238, because she had a tag hanging in her with the number 238. We had 4 pigs all named Pig, and a bunch of cats that didn't have a name at all. Because, as my grandpa said, why name something that doesn't come when you call? So his truck is facing the wrong direction. It's facing towards the fields. And all of a sudden, I realized what was going on. We climbed into the truck, and he starts driving up this little dirt path in between the 2 fields, which we called the lane, towards an area that we called the back 40. That's where all the irrigation equipment was, for all the gentlemen farmers in the area to irrigate their fields. And he never turned the headlights on. Now, Franklin Knowles, who had an adjoining field, had been stealing Grandpa's water. Now, in the time in which I was raised, if you stole a man's horse, you went to jail. If you stole a man's wife, you got talked about at church. If you stole a man's water, you got dead. Dead. Franklin Knowles had been stealing Grandpa's water, and he was going to do something about it. I had no idea what he planned on doing, but I did know he planned on involving me in black, right down to my Sunday school shoes. I had been invited to the crime. Today I was a man. So we're driving down the lane very slowly. We get about 20 yards out. He flips the ignition off and we just coast into a stop. He hops out of his driver's side. I had to be a little more careful over to my side because the door squeaked. And by the time I got around to the back, he has the tailgate open. He's got his pocket knife out and he's stabbing holes in 3 bags of quick dry, ready set cement. Flips his eye closed, he takes a knee and he goes, "Dale, my boy, if anything happens, you go home and you go to bed. You didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything, you don't know anything." I knew what he meant, because stealing water being dangerous, if I was going to be stealing water, I'd watch to make sure I got away with it. And because it is so dangerous, I'd be armed. He picks up one of those bags of cement, throws it onto my shoulder, picks up the other 2, throws them on his shoulder, and we sneak over to the head gates. And sure enough, Franklin Knowles is open, Grandpa's is closed, and it is Friday to Saturday. It is on. He goes like this. And I drop that bag of cement right behind Franklin Knowles' head gate. He follows with his 2. And we watch that water rise up and activate that cement. And in half an hour's time, not a drop of water would ever flow through that culvert again, absent high explosives or a really good jackhammer. We're watching the water rise up, and all of a sudden I hear it. The unmistakable sound of a 10-gauge shell being racked into a shotgun. I dove to the right, Grandpa dove to the left, just in time to hear. And I felt the breeze as the pellets blew over my head, and I started crawling through the west field. And I realized that every time I moved, it rattled the alfalfa, and I was just painting a target on my back. So I froze. And when I froze, I had no idea where my grandpa was. But I heard boots stomping through the alfalfa behind me, and I held my breath, and they went right past. And I rolled, and I crawled, and I made a noise, and the boots came stomping back, and I froze. And they went right past me, and I rolled, and I crawled, and I rolled, and I crawled, and I rolled, and I crawled, and suddenly it all became clear to me. My part in this little drama. I was my grandfather's escape plan. We played cat and mouse through that field the whole rest of the night. Stomp, 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 roll, crawl, stomp, roll, crawl, stomp, 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 roll, crawl. I got to the end of the field just as the sun was coming up, and I ran for the closest door, which was my grandfather's kitchen. I burst through the door, and there's my grandfather eating breakfast. And I said, "Grandpa, are you all right?" And he looks at me and says, "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" Oh, my grandmother was right behind me cooking breakfast. So like any good co-conspirator, at that point, I shut up. I sat down and my grandmother put a plate of eggs in front of me, and she looked at my grandfather and she said, "Ole," his name by the way, "Ole, while you were out milking the cows, Franklin Knowles called." My grandpa said, "Really? What did he want?" "Oh, he just wants to know if he could borrow your jackhammer."